we will go ahead and convene, and again, we are recording, so we will edit it so it only starts at this moment, but we're gonna go ahead and convene at 5:37. Please stand and face the flag with me. Pledge allegiance, ready to begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So our first item of business is to approve the agenda. We have no emergency additions or modifications, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion, we approve.
Second.
Got first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We were not able to get the minutes to you in advance of this meeting, and so Kathy's been working on those, and they will come to you at the next meeting, at which time you'll be asked to approve the minutes from last meeting as well as the minutes for this meeting, just so you know. So our very first item following the approval of the agenda is our election of a committee chair. Trevor, I'm very grateful for your willingness to serve in this role, and so we've not received guidance or feedback from anyone else interested, but this is a time that if anyone were interested, they could make it known. Otherwise, we will entertain a motion to elect Trevor Quirk as the committee chair.
I make a motion that we elect Trevor Quirk as chair for the 7-Eleven, this session of the 7-Eleven committee.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, you are now chair, and I'm gonna sit down. You take it from here.
Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda is to elect a secretary. Is there anyone who wants to volunteer and be the secretary?
I'll do it.
Oh, great. You have to remind me your name.
Emily.
So Emily has volunteered. Do we have a motion to appoint Emily as the, what's your last name?
Doty.
D-O. Emily Doty as the secretary.
I move to elect Emily Doty as the secretary.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, passes. Public comment period. Do we have isn't there usually a list of speakers for the public?
We do have
comment?
speaker cards, although if anyone in the audience would like to speak, hasn't yet filled one out, you're welcome to speak, and we'll have you fill out the card after.
Chair, I would like to read
Dr. Beatty's comment.
an email. I received an email from Dr. Beatty. It just said, well, I'll just read the whole thing. Trevor, Bob, could one of you please read into the minutes a statement from me as I am unable to attend tonight's meeting, 7-Eleven committee. So this is from Dr. James T. Beatty. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the 3/27/19 meeting. Please read into the minutes the following regarding our committee task. It is my opinion the entire site, including buildings and open land, is surplus. I feel the current arrangement with Mr. Beatty and Rock Tree Sky meets the purpose of section 17458. As long as he is managing the open land portion of education and or public beneficial uses, then his coordination of this is acceptable for the entire property. Since no variables have significantly changed since the closing of the school, with no change expected in the foreseeable future, and no alternative plans being presented by the school board, then it is likely the school will remain closed. I recommend extending a negotiated lease with Mr. Bailey for at least 3 years with annual review of usage. Sincerely, Dr. James T. Beatty. And would you pass that to the
Sure.
secretary? I think she takes custody of that.
Any comments on Dr. Beatty's? I have one. Email. What is 17458? Does anyone remember what that was? I have the legal education code, but I don't remember that specific code being referenced.
I'll take a look for that. We shouldn't really actually engage in his comment until we get a little bit later in our evening.
Okay,
So
thanks.
I'll get the answer to you before that time. Can you say again the section?
I thought he said one,
17458.
It's on page 6 of
Yeah.
our materials from
Exactly. From,
last time.
so, just to clarify again, we want to typically avoid having too much engagement during the public comment section. You guys have an opportunity to engage later in the evening, but just to clarify at this time, if you go back to your materials from last meeting, pages 5 and 6 provide various ed code related to the task that you guys have been charged with. And if you go to page 6, you'll see about halfway down the page, ed code 17458, that as part of your task, you are to make a final determination of the limits of tolerance of use of the space and real property, and then forward that to the governing board. So it seems that he's pretty aggressively jumping to his opinion on the end of the line.
any other public comments? No? The next item on the agenda is a presentation on the Rock Tree Sky by Rock Tree Sky Director, Mr. Jim Bailey, and I see Mr. Bailey in the audience.
Okay. Thanks again to everybody on the committee. Time is valuable, and I appreciate y'all being here. I figured I would share a little bit about what our mission is, who we serve, where our kids come from, the financial aspect, and then leave some time for question and answer. And so, you know, to be clear, I think the best mission of what Rock Tree Sky is a youth enrichment program that supports independent study and self-direction. We serve the needs of homeschooling families throughout Ventura County. We offer support in social emotional development, makerspace themed activities, outdoor education, self-directed play, tutoring, and supporting kids in self-directed learning projects. We are a 501c3 public benefit corporation with the charity status of 509A2, which has to do with educational environments. If Rock Tree Sky, that being said, if Rock Tree Sky were to close its doors, all the financial accounts, the money in the bank, and physical properties would need to be donated to another nonprofit organization. And, you know, just to be clear, it's not something that would go into my pocket or anybody who works there. It gets forwarded to another not-for-profit organization or public charity organization. We have a board of directors, and that board of directors determines the salary of the directors of the program. So, now an interesting question is, where do our families come from? And it was really interesting to take a look at all of our students. We went through each student, and luckily we're small enough to know them all well and their families. And out of the 104, it was a little bit less a few weeks ago, but we got a couple more. 104 total students in our program, and by the way, most of those students come either 2 or 3 days. The primary group is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then there's another group that comes on Monday, Friday. So those are not all there at one time, right? So we serve some kids come 1 day a week, some come 2, some come 3, and others come more, depending on their homeschool program. So of those 104, 57 live within OUSD boundaries, as given to me, a map by Andy, and 47 come from outside. Our average daily attendance is somewhere in the 40 to 55 range of students there every day. Of those 57 within OUSD, 39 transferred to homeschooling and to RTS that hadn't been homeschooling before, right? They hadn't been homeschooling, and they said, we want to homeschool, and we want to use your program for assistance. 27 of those came from private schools in Ohio Valley. So, and then 12 were from OUSD, and 6 of those are junior high school students. You know, that it wasn't working for them for whatever reason, and they decided they wanted to homeschool, and they didn't want to go to SHAP for whatever reason. And the rest are elementary. And by the way, 2 are going back next year. So I imagine there's always gonna be some back and forth, and one of the high schoolers is graduating. Within OUSD, 16 were already homeschooling and decided to join us for some support, and 2 came from Valley Oak Charter. So those are the data points from within OUSD.
Can you please repeat those, Jim? I was trying to keep.
It should be, it's on your, it's in today's packet, so,
Okay.
sorry, Trevor.
Thanks.
It's on,
Page 4.
Just trying to
Yeah.
keep up with you.
Sorry, yeah, why don't you join me there? Now, outside OUSD, it was interesting, it was a little bit different. Of the 47 that come from outside OUSD boundaries, 38 fully were already homeschooling and are coming in to this area to access the services, you know, the enrichment, the socialization, the normalization, maybe some tutoring and things like that. Only 2 came from private school, and the other 7 came from a public or charter school. And specifically, I believe there's a program in Ventura called Open Classroom, which, you know,
Yeah,
has
exactly, not
And-
much longer.
not much
Yeah.
longer, right? So,
Closed it, yeah.
then they had switched, like they were only focusing on the younger kids or something, but that program had been narrowed, and so we got a group of them. And I think those are some of those numbers. Does anybody have any questions on those numbers before I move? Yes?
What about, do you have demographic data?
Do I have demographic in terms of socioeconomics or things like
No,
that?
and Caucasian, Hispanic, other,
I don't have that data. I can get that data, I suppose. I wonder, like, I don't know if I have a legal, so that data might be with their the charter school they go to. I'd have to, I mean, is there legality about us asking for that particular data, what they identify for? I don't know.
Can't
Yeah.
provide guidance on that.
I got you. I might have to talk to somebody about finding that out. That's not something we record. Because we're, you know, they come to us to access like extra services. We're not a school, so we don't have that data because we're not an official government agency. Trevor?
Of the 47 that are outside OUSD,
Yes.
where are those coming? I mean, I see they're from private, public, or homeschool. I'm just wondering, like, where they're coming from.
Primarily Ventura. They're Ventura and Santa Paula. Ventura and Santa Paula primarily. There's, I think, 2 in Camarillo, and there's a couple families that come 1 day a week from Thousand Oaks.
What about Fillmore?
I don't believe we have any families from Fillmore.
Okay, thanks.
So, but feel free if something were to arrive later on those numbers. It was a good exercise for us to take a look at that. Now, how do families pay for Rock Tree Sky? That's another big question. People have said, you know, you're kind of a private program. Well, in a sense, you know, yes, but let's take a look. So, of the families who come to Rock Tree Sky, 96% use enrichment funding that they get from a public homeschool charter school to offset the cost of attendance. So fully 96% are offsetting cost with charter school enrichment funding. We are one amongst a list of many approved vendors for various homeschool charter schools operating in Ventura County. Like many organizations, our primary costs are staffing, rent, and then materials. Homeschool charter schools vary in their funding models, but most seem to currently be providing families with an annual enrichment funding of between $2,600 and $3,000. If a family would like to access more time at RTS than this allows, they're asked to cover the rest out of pocket. That being said, families are offered financial aid to cover the difference if needed. So if we take a look at that, out of the 104 students, 100 use enrichment funds. Those other 4, they are not accessing charter school, and they are filing a private school affidavit, right? So they're saying our home is the school. Those are the kind of the real, what we think of as the homeschoolers. The rest are, you know, accessing a virtual homeschool charter school. 52 out of those 104 pay 0 fees. So half of our students, full 50%, access RTS, most for 2 days, and pay no out-of-pocket fees. So, you know, granted, it's not 5 days a week. You're not gonna get, we can't afford free 5 days a week. 39 are covered entirely by those enrichment funds and come for 1 or 2 days. That's 38% of total. And there's 65 students who the enrichment funds do not cover the entire cost of the days that they've chosen to attend. Now, of those, 25 of them receive financial aid from us, from the program, where we just say you can't afford to pay it, so we're gonna cover that, and that's 24% of the total students receive financial aid from RTS. And 38%, 40 students or families pay full price for the extra days. They might come an extra day, the third day, and then they would pay full price. And that's where that's at. Yes? Bob?
Mr. Bailey,
Yes?
acronym RTS.
Oh, Rock Tree Sky.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, no, I'm just
Yes.
following along.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Do you have family rate? I have 4 kids.
Well, yes, we definitely, we support the families. And that's oftentimes what it is, we'll get three kids, and so they definitely get a bit of a discount, for sure, or some financial aid. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? I hate to go backwards.
Okay.
Can you give us a little history on Rock Tree Sky, like when it was founded?
Oh, sure.
Because I just
Sorry, Trevor. Thanks.
I just want to know.
So this is our 3rd year, okay, and basically, I taught 9 years, dream job, 8th grade, Matilah School. I thought I'd be there the rest of my life. Seriously, I thought, I'm gonna just get better and better, this is amazing. And then, of course, I came in at the bubble, and the enrollment started declining ever since. I was lucky enough that OHIED Foundation supported, my work with the kids, and they found a elementary science specialist position where I got to travel around to each of the schools for half of my day, kind of kept my job alive for another 4 years. And then, it got to a point where there just wasn't enough need, so they only needed 1 8th grade science teacher at Matilah instead of the 2 that they had needed when I got hired. So, I got pink slipped, and it was right at the time my daughter, who was 13, was moving out to live with me from Minnesota, and I was looking in Oxnard, I was looking in Ventura, and I chose to stay a little more close to home because I wanted my daughter to be, I knew she'd be going to Nordhoff or Matilah to be closer by. And so I taught at Oak Grove. Luckily, Oak Grove had a job. I taught there for 6 years. I taught 6th grade, and I enjoyed that. I liked it. And however, my wife and I have a daughter, my stepdaughter, and my wife wanted to homeschool her, and so she went to a meeting of some homeschool families in the community, and I went along just to see, and there was a lot of families from Oak Grove and some other families that I really respected, and I was surprised. There were some interesting people there who cared about education, they were educated themselves, and they were gonna make a choice to homeschool their families. When they saw me there, they said, hey, would you do a science portion of this, on the side? And I said, let's think about this. We went to another meeting, and before we knew it, we had 17 families that said, if you guys would start a program, we'll come. Day 1, we'll be there. So we started, we rented a space up at the market, Stagecoach Market, where that's at, and we started there, and we, would take the kids up and, do some farm chores at our house in the middle of the day, and it just grew from there.
That was 2016 then, or 2015?
2016, 17, 2017, 18, yeah, 2016. So that's how it started,
You are the founder of this rock tree.
Yes.
Why did you name that rock tree?
Rock Tree Sky, why? I have a good friend in Ojai who told me if I ever started a business that you need to find one with 3 words because all the good 2-word websites are gone. They've already been taken, right? You have to pay GoDaddy a lot of money to get it. And then I was driving home one day. I wanted to do a business for Ojai Unified, kind of like Art Trek. Do you know Art Trek? I wanted to do a science trek version and go in and train the PTO parents about how to do some of these fun science lessons I'd learned over the years. And I thought, well, I was driving home, I remembered an old story called A Rock, a Tree, a Cloud, and it's a beautiful short story in which an old man imparts to a young boy the necessity of learning to love the small things first. And, I thought, oh, rock, tree, rock is geology, tree is life science, and the sky, I changed cloud to sky, that is, atmosphere and space. So, which is, those are my loves. I love teaching science, so that's how we got that name.
And this address that you have here, is that your home, or what address is that?
What address do I have there?
Seaside Road?
Yeah, that's our home, and so we get our business mail there, but currently we are renting space at Summit School at 12525 Ojai Santa Paula Avenue, but that is our home address. Yeah.
Are your teachers all accredited or
No, and,
babysitters?
thankfully, they're not all accredited because we have a profoundly excellent art teacher who doesn't have a teaching credential, but she has been teaching art for 20 years and is a docent in a museum. She could never teach. I don't know that I would want to be accredited because I would lose a couple of my best faculty or staff.
So the pay rate depends what the directors assign each to us,
Currently,
not by union rates and anything like that.
not union rates, no. Currently, though, we're talking about moving to kind of a mutually agreed upon rate, we have some staff who would need a little bit more, and, and see if we can work as a group to pay them more, and maybe I make a little less. My wife and I are blessed, we have a rental house in the front, that covers, our mortgage, and so we're able to do all right, and, if we can, some others might need a little more, right? So we try to work that out in our staff.
You plan to move your school and lease it from them? How
I'd like to.
soon?
That all depends on this committee. I would, how soon to get into a lease? If the committee was interested in working with an organization like ours, as soon as the district wanted to, I'd be comfortable with, sure.
Would you lease the place?
I would love to lease the place,
For how many years?
as long as you'd let us be there. My wife, she says, if we get 10 or 15 years, wherever it is out of it, and I want this program to last beyond us. There's not a place like this on the West Coast. There's some places like this on the East Coast, there's a place like this in England, but there's nothing like what we're doing on the West Coast, and it's a model that serves certain kids really well.
And I noticed your children come from all the different places. How do you advertise?
Word of mouth. The parents advertise for us. The happy children advertise for us, that say, I'm loving being here. So that does it. We have it. The newspaper's called us a few times, and I'm sure there'll be a time we're gonna take out an ad, but we haven't yet. It's really a word of mouth kind of thing.
And the lunch is served there, or you?
No, the school site does not have a permit for food service, so the kids have to bring brown bag lunch or bring their own lunch. Nowadays, they bring all these reusable metal lunch containers. So, yeah, we'd love to do a lunch program and have the kids help prepare and all that, but we're not there yet. Kids love to cook, they love to contribute.
Have you decided to have some pre-kindergarten class?
I'd have to look into, if we ever did that, it'd be like where the parents would be there, maybe parents of older children want to come and have a place to be with their younger children. I don't know that the site could allow a childcare type of operation. Those are some specific requirements there. But if the parents, we thought about having a space where the parents with younger kids could stay and be there, and kind of and it's gentler separation for some of the older kids, the kindergarten kids. That's something we've talked about.
Can I ask you a question on the numbers, 104? What were the initial numbers? How have you grown, and where do you see yourself in 2, 3 years, 5 years,
Yeah.
10 years, et cetera?
So the initial numbers, I think 17 at the beginning. We ended the year at 32. We started the next year at 45 and ended at 70. And remember, not all those coming on any given day, right? Because we didn't have enough space and we didn't have enough staff for any of those numbers on any single day. I don't think it's something that can grow exponentially. I really wonder if there is a limit on the amount of families who want to pursue this type of learning environment for their kids outside of the homeschooling that they're doing on their own. I think there's just a natural limit. It's something it is different, and I don't think that there's a ton of people who are gonna be, super comfortable with this as a model, or homeschooling as a model. I think it's gonna have its own limits. What would my ideal number be? I think 120 total, 130, and that could be like 70 on any given day, 60 to 70 on any given day. But You know, I don't know, it depends on how much space we have in the site, and you know, I'd have to feel it out. Could we do what we do well? You know, the best thing for us is to do what we do well. That's what I always say to my staff. You know, in terms of advertising, the way that we're gonna advertise is to do it well, you know, and provide these families with this rich experience for their kids that they're not getting elsewhere. And then that's what's gonna do it. So I don't know, at larger numbers, still figuring out, you know, how to do that well.
And the families that do come up there, what are the hours of your school? Do they drop their kids off and leave and come back, or how does that, do they stay there?
The hours of our program are 9 to 3, and they can, you know, we don't have any tardy slips, Trevor, so if they're there a little late, because oftentimes it's the parent who's tardy and not the kid. I learned that a long time ago. If they're, you know, and it's enrichment, so they come at 9, they come at 10, you know, they might miss hearing what's on offer that morning, and they're gonna have to go check the offerings board. 9 to 3, and the parents generally drop off. If it's a younger child, we support gentle separation, and we ask the parent to find a place on a picnic bench and be boring. You know, what we don't want is a parent walking around saying, oh, why don't you go do Jim's science lesson, or, oh, why don't you go over here to Casey's bow making thing, you know? So we try to ask them to let the kids be, right? It's a space where the kids get to choose.
When you lease the property, are you gonna maintain the buildings and the grounds?
Absolutely. So when we painted it already, it really depends on the lease agreement.
Yeah.
You know, whatever the district wanted, it would really be up to what the lease agreement is. But, you know, I have a certain sense of aesthetic that I wanna maintain. If I leased it, I'd like to talk to the district about sharing in some improvements. You know, that asphalt out there is terrible, and people trip on it all the time, you know? So there's some things, some real beautification that I would be interested in sharing with the district, or covering depending on how long the lease was for. Yeah, to me.
Would you go for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years would be nice. You know, yeah, and of course, yeah, I'd love 5 years, and then I'll look at another 5 years if there wasn't enough kids up there. Absolutely.
During the time that you do use the school, do you prohibit anyone from coming onto the school property?
That's a good question. You know, it's an environment with kids and, you know, the bathrooms and everything, and so if somebody comes on, we like to go check in and ask them to check in with us. There's a sign out there, it's still from the school, you know, check in at the office, but, you know, and I've talked with this about some folks, about if it was to be used as a, you know, shared use with some sort of, community kind of use space, and I would say in the afternoons, after program, it'd seem fun, but during the day, you know, I have safety issues related to the kids, so I don't just want any stranger coming on. You know, I'm gonna go check in with who that is, and my staff is gonna check in with whoever that person is.
How's the homeless situation up there?
Only once, when we were at the space next door, did we come in the morning and find a woman sleeping underneath some plywood that was leaning against the fence.
So let's
But that
let
was once.
Mr. Bailey complete his presentation.
Yes.
We're supposed to have a time limit, I think.
All
We
right,
don't
all
have
right.
our timer tonight.
Yeah, and the rest is just real basic. I had heard that somebody, or folks were saying, you know, saying that they didn't think we were a not-for-profit, that was not accurate, so I included on the next page, you'll see our charity status from the IRS, which was effective March 11th, 2016. It was stamped August 11th, 2017, and it was effective March 11th, 2016, backdated to the day that we incorporated the program. So I just want to make sure it's clear that everybody understands that we are that. And then we lowered our prices, actually, from this year's fee schedule. You can see 1 day a week was $2,500. Of course, you know, 2 days were actually covered. You know, we gave folks a benefit if they use their enrichment funds. And you can see on the next page our fee schedule for next year. We've lowered our prices. If somebody was a homeschooler and wanted to access various services over all 5 days, and they were gonna pay 100% out of pocket, that'd be $10,000. It's the lowest price in Ojai it's lower than any other kind of private school in Ojai. And that's probably the benefit of being able to access those enrichment funds. You know, of course, some of that would come out of that. anyways, that's what I have to share, and I'm open to questions. We're just trying to create a space for families who need some enrichment and are homeschooling, that choose to homeschool and want the stuff that they're not gonna get to at home, or they want some social normalization for their kids, or maybe a regular school's just not gonna work for that kid. We had one student who's came from OUSD that the teacher actually told the parent, I'm not gonna say who the teacher was, told the parent, why don't you go look up there, I think this might serve this particular student better. And I love it, and that student has lately just gotten into metal detecting. And so together we research how a metal detector works. It works by magnetic resonance, which is really interesting. It sends out a magnetic field, causes an electric field to go round and round in the metal, and then that moving electric field creates a new magnetic field that the detector then detects. And as a result, this young man's gotten into history because he's learning about these coins that he's finding that are all silver, and why didn't they use any copper when they're using copper in the war. So, we try to create that kind of space too.
All coins found on the property are property of the district.
Oh,
right?
Yes, that's good. That's
Chair?
good. Jessica.
Chair, do you have an order that you just like to go around and have
I think what
questions you
we're
want us to
technically
random,
supposed to
or
do
what
is
would
we're
you
supposed to
like?
let the presenters do their presentation,
Right.
and then we open it up to public comment. I think there's supposed to be a specific period of public comment, like a time limitation, if I
Okay.
recall right. And then I think it's just open to public comment. We kind of jumped the gun and we're just doing public comment in the middle of your presentation, which,
Okay.
my bad, but it's a learning curve.
We're all
The
here
committee
together.
though certainly is able, it's obviously the chair's call, but the committee can engage a presenter at any time. It is different for a
Okay.
committee compared to me being a
Okay.
member of the public.
Just want to know.
I think it's whatever suits this committee, however you guys think we should do it. I just was thinking that instead of keeping interrupting you, we let you finish and then have at it.
Got it.
But
Yeah.
You utilize the entire property, the buildings and the track area, the playground, all that?
Sure, it's a beautiful open space. We don't have the kids are in the program. We ask them not to go down that lower part. It's really hard to get eyes on that unless they ask the mentor to go down there. But we do, we love using the whole space. We don't use all the rooms. We don't have, we're not renting all the rooms, and we don't use all of them. We don't use room 5 specifically. We have been able, the district's allowed us to access the rooms, but not to make any changes or to remove the district, like the computers and the library stuff. So they've allowed us to use that space, but not make it our own.
Okay. And are you doing a garden behind there or no?
Food for Thought still does the garden. We checked in with them and Condor Kids.
Uh-huh.
Food for Thought and Condor Kids have a garden program, and they said we're not using all of it, so you can use some of the garden space. And they pointed out where that was, and we've got a shared use on the garden with them.
Could you go, this is gonna be boring and
Okay.
gruesome. Let's go over numbers and percentages.
Sure.
I keep adding them up and they're about 200%, and I'm
Uh-oh.
one of those guys that
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yep.
And again, I applaud you for being a teacher, and I
Thank you.
applaud you for finding a way to continue educating, once the big slip comes. And this is just really for specific background and understanding.
Yep.
There's no negative or push or anything. So when I take a look at page 5,
Yep.
numbers and percentage, and I'm missing something the way this is put together.
Yeah.
So if I take a look at the 52 pay no fees and 39 covered entirely by enrichment funds, I come up with 88% between those two groups.
Yeah, of the 52 that pay no fees, 39 are embedded in that 52.
Okay.
That was my clarity.
That's okay, I'm just,
Yeah,
trying
of course.
to find out where that gets.
Those 39 came out of that 52.
Okay, and so, I wanna go over to page 7.
Yes.
Do we have anything that tells me, and if these are trade secrets, I don't need to know, okay? I'm just trying to get a grasp
Mm-hmm.
on actual need and usage. How many, to the bottom, how many 3-program students do we have out of out of our 104?
It-
And you don't have to answer that just yet.
Okay,
So what we have is we have we got a 3 program, which is, it says Fridays, all 3 programs, 10, Wednesdays, 3 days, 10, and then Fridays, all 3. And so I'm not really understanding how those go.
Ages.
It looks like they're all 3 programs.
The age group. That's ages, or grades 9 through
Oh,
12.
that's,
and
okay,
K
so
through-
that's the difference is the
high school's a little
ages.
more, yeah.
Okay, so the high school's a little more, 3 days, but then when I get to the very last one, where does that go? All 3 programs, 9 to 3, which is a different price than the high school or the K-8.
Yeah, 13.5 as opposed to the 10.
Yeah, I was just wondering what,
Because we bring in tutors, we bring in some people.
but
that I
who,
know-
The all
which
3
class?
programs, Monday's conservative program, Tuesday,
Oh, yeah.
Wednesday, Thursday's a program,
Yeah.
and Friday's a program. So when it says 3 programs, you're just saying 5 days a week.
Yep,
Okay,
sorry about that.
no, that's,
Clarity.
I just didn't understand where that goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's only about 5 kids, I think, who do that.
Any other questions?
So how many teachers do you have?
We have 7 full-time staff members there every day, along with, a few specialists that come in and out, like this music teacher who comes twice a week, but 7 full-time staff. The ratio of adult mentor to learner is right around 10 to 1 at the max. I mean, it's actually less than 10 to 1.
Mr. Bailey, I'm gonna ask a pretty ignorant question.
Mm.
Why not become a regular charter? What's the difference? What am I missing? I know we've got tech schools, we got magnet schools, we got charter schools, we've got a cornucopia of schools
Sure.
these days.
Sure. The families we serve don't necessarily believe in an artificial timeline of when students should learn what they should learn. And if I become a charter school, then I'm saying all 4th graders need to learn this material at this year. And we don't feel that that is the most efficient use of the students' time.
I've been through it, I understand
Okay.
it.
So that's the only
it-
reason.
It has to do with
And-
restraints and following a track.
Common
Right,
Core.
right. And I probably would lose staff that I love, that the kids love, that
Okay,
don't
it-
have a credential.
It's the track, you're gonna have to make a state mandated track.
Right, and so the
Okay.
families are doing that elsewhere, they're doing state mandated tracks at their home, and then we get to be free to pursue the other areas of interest.
Is your school accredited?
No, and we are not legally a school. We are, I don't know, I don't like the word vendor, but we're we are a service provider for families. We provide socialization in a supportive, caring environment, and we provide enrichment for the things that they might not see.
So when you graduate high school, was a diploma?
Yeah, they get their diploma from the charters, from the homeschool that they go to. So all these students will get a diploma, and they actually take accredited courses from an accredited school, and they get a diploma from that school as long as they turn in. They all meet with a regular teacher about once a month, and they have to turn in work samples from their grade level. Sometimes they get support from us in that, if they want it. Otherwise, they do it all at home, and they will get that, they'll get that diploma from them. And those few students that do a homeschool, a private school affidavit where their home is the school, then those parents are responsible for making their own, their own,
Graduation.
yes, set of classes.
How many years you've been in business?
3.
Did you have any of your kids go to college? What's the percentage of your kids go to college?
We're coming up on our first graduate,
Oh.
and he will be going to college next year. He was applying to some different schools and then decided he wanted to stay more local. Brilliant young man, and he'll do fine wherever he goes, but he's going to, I think he's just gonna go to a 2-year school. And, yeah, my wife left high school after 10th grade and just went to junior college. She just said, I don't really need the high school anymore, and just went on.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
What is your specific request to the 7-Eleven committee?
Oh, thank you, Trevor. Yeah, so my request is that if the school site is not going to be needed by the district, you know, I would say, when I talk to people in the Upper Valley, they have appreciated that we are still maintaining this site for its original purpose and intent. I've had numerous people come up to me and say, we love that there's kids there again. We love that we can hear the kids, you know, laughing and playing. We love seeing the energy and the vibrancy. And so, you know, my request would be, you know, if this district doesn't need it, we'd be, you know, glad to pay lease and have that money go into the district to support students and teachers in other ways, and use this site as a, you know, a unique kind of location for continuing education, supporting homeschool families.
Let's drill down on that a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Sure.
Pay a lease means amount of money.
Sure.
Is that, I can't recall how much money you're paying for the license right now. Is
Yeah.
it the same amount?
It's
16,000.
16,000, right?
Alright.
So I imagine a lease would be a lot more. I don't know. I know a
A
program.
lot more.
I know a program like this in Los Osos.
That's
And-
per year.
Per year, yeah.
Okay.
I know, yeah, a lot more.
Okay.
So a program like this, that pays a lease to a school district in Los Osos, uses their space, I think they started out at 50,000. I don't know what that school site size is like, and that's what they started at. And it kind of went up a little bit incrementally. They pay 50,000 a year beginning.
What's
And they've been
the,
theirs for 7 years.
what's the name of that?
Man,
Do you know?
There could
Moon
be
something, I can find that for you. I will
Okay.
find out.
All right, so I don't know, I guess we'd have to talk with this Andy or the school board. And I don't know if the negotiation, I'm assuming the negotiation takes place between yourself and the school board or yourself and the new superintendent, but in terms of Rock Tree Sky saying, we are offering to lease this facility
Yeah.
at current market value, I guess, or whatever is negotiated between you and the school board or you and the superintendent
Right.
for a period of what,
I would,
ideally?
5 years with 2 5-year rights of refusals.
Okay.
Trevor, this is more for the superintendent, but isn't there a process to lease the school that requires open bidding? Or if a charter school wants to use the school, they have first right? I mean, there's a process? Okay, so it doesn't really mean it has to be done in a certain way.
That's right.
So I don't know why we're talking about that now.
Well, this committee has been given a overarching charge. You guys determine what information is important for you to help arrive at a decision, so it sounds like.
But I don't
the
even
committee-
think, I guess I don't think we know what's involved with it or what kind of decision can be made.
So once again, you guys are not a decision-making body anyway,
Right.
so you guys are an advisory body, so whatever information you feel is relevant to help arrive at an advisement, a recommendation, is appropriate for you guys to hear and discuss. Ultimately, yes, there is a process by which, what would ultimately, if the board decide to surplus the property, of how it ultimately can be arrived at to be able to enter into a lease. There are certain entities that have rights to the property in advance of actually going out to bid. Those rights, though, are typically actually simply rights of negotiation, not rights of accessing the property at a certain value. For charter schools, the requirements would be that if it was a charter school that wanted to be able to have rights that could be exercised in advance of a group like Rock Tree Sky, or a resource center like what Oakview had, or other sorts of users, depending on actually how the resource center was structured, they might actually have superseding rights as well. But for a charter school, the only way a charter school has any rights at all in a negotiation or in the process of accessing the site, they must have 80 ADA, which is education speak for average daily attendance. It means that, you know, if you have 85 kids enrolled in a school, some kids miss each day, and so the average kids who attend might be 80. So it's 80 ADA, let's call it 86 kids to be safe. who reside within the boundaries of the district. So it wouldn't, for Summit specifically, it wouldn't include any kid that lives into the Mufu or San Paulo districts. It'd have to be 86 OUSD students who are gonna be in a classroom-based program. So it could be a program like Jim's that was gonna be independent study or a hybrid model, 2 days in, 3 days at home, that sort of thing. So it'd have to be a 5-day-a-week classroom-based program with at least 86 children coming from within our boundaries and likely more coming from outside. But that's the way in which a charter would have rights ahead of the other types of users that this committee might consider advising the board to support. So remember though, when we do a bid, the district's able to craft the bid document based on the recommendation of this committee. So if this committee said, we support, remember we walked through last meeting, the steps that you guys are gonna go through. You'll ultimately make a determination if it's surplus. You'll talk about what uses you guys support. That's just hypothetically say, I'm not in any way trying to advocate for Rock Tree Sky, but that's for now. Let's say that this committee made a recommendation to the board that you would support, and you believe that the Upper Ohio community supports a 5-year lease with a program like Jim's. The board would not be able to exclusively enter into negotiations with Jim's, but they could narrowly tailor the bid document to say that they will only accept bids for uses that will go toward enrichment programs for homeschooled and alternative educated children within the K-12 continuum or something like that. So again, we have to make it available to other groups that might serve a similar constituency. But, it couldn't only be for him, but you could sufficiently narrowly tailor it so that you don't have a housing developer respond. That makes sense? Again, if you guys would like more detail on that, that certainly would make sense. It's one that we revisit. I think we talked about last meeting, but we can revisit it as well in the future.
Andy, can you tell again the specific ask of this committee is, we're an advisory board, and we're asked to do what? Say it again, just so we all can hear it.
So let's actually go back to the pages to make sure that we know in the future also where to reference.
Page three.
Right.
Page 3 of last meeting's materials. Okay? The first thing is that you're gonna review whatever information you need along with student enrollment for the district to make an evaluation as to whether or not you believe that this property should be deemed surplus. Meaning that the district doesn't need to retain all the rights of ownership. When we say rights of ownership, that includes the ability for us to use it at any time. Like again, we could kick Jim out tonight, I could tell him right now, sorry, get the things out, before we start tomorrow, I'm gonna go out there and start using it. If we deem it surplus, if we want to give him, for instance, the ability to plan for a school year and actually know that he has it for the entire year, we have to deem the property surplus. So that's the first thing you guys have to decide. Do you believe it should be deemed surplus? And if so, for a limited duration, 1 or 2 years, or for an indefinite duration, potentially forever. You would then establish a list, specifically identifying again whether it's the entire property or it might only be that lower section, the second parcel as the tract. Perhaps that's what this committee would say. No, we think the district needs to retain all rights on the buildings, but the 4 acres down below should be surplus and considered for alternative use. Then number 3 is that you would cause to have circulated throughout. Within number 2 is when you do exactly what we're doing right now, which is talk about what uses would we support. And so you guys might come up with a list of 5 different uses. We support a resource center, we would support a facility which can hold, again, enrichment activities for children, and I know this one will not be supported, but let's just say we support a strip mall. Just thinking of a third. So you would say that these are the 3 things that we as a committee support. So you take an initial position saying these 3 things we believe are appropriate to look at the district to consider using the space for. You then would make that opinion known throughout the community. We'd be using a newspaper, we'd be posting it to our website, we'd be emailing it out to our constituencies. So that way the whole community knew what you guys were taking a position on. You then would hold a public hearing so people can say, are you crazy? Why would you do a strip mall? And then after that feedback, you guys might then decide, yeah, strip mall probably is a bad idea, we're only gonna look at the first 2 options. And then you would take a final vote, and that would be the time at which you would forward to the district your recommendations. Does that make sense? You're evaluating information to decide whether or not the district should even consider surplusing it. And then what things you think would be appropriate alternative uses and for how long? Does that make sense? Right.
Wow.
What happens to Rock Tree Sky if the lease is pulled? Or the license is pulled? I mean, you can't put 170 kids back next to the Stagecoach Market.
Yeah, those families, yeah, I guess the families would just have to go back to homeschooling at home completely, you know, accessing other vendor programs, you know, more sailing lessons, I don't know, more dance lessons. You know, we currently still have a lease with Billy Lindsay. We could shrink the program down and go back there. Or we could ask everybody to, you know, go back home, put it on hold for a year and try and raise funds and build somewhere else. Or try and rent somewhere else. I mean, we had to scramble at one point to try and find an alternate location, and you know, we just try and look. Valley Oak Charter, I guess, has some room to rent. You know, they bought that whole church building. You know, so I don't know, maybe we take it on the road, you know, but it should be hard. Yeah, it'd be some dark days, for sure. You know, and that's the thing that I have a sense of, you know, we gotta take, you know, we're holding the space for all these families, right? It's not just about the program, it's about these families and these kids, and it becomes their community too. You know, and that's kind of the thing that I try and carry, is that I've gotta really try and guide this safely for all those families who, you know, this has become their community.
Does this,
right?
do the 7 staff members all reside within Upper Ojai? And does that, one of them include your wife? She's a staff?
So she's
Okay.
one, she lives in Upper Ojai. One lives in Santa Paula, and the rest live in the Lower Valley.
All right. Interesting. Thanks.
Of course.
Any other questions for Mr. Bailey?
I have a question which will be affected, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Cantwell,
Yes.
what are the continuing costs outside of Measure G? What are the continuing costs? What are the actual real costs to keep that facility to the school board? Do we know?
So we don't have that figure for you today. I've presented a few different figures, but right now, so he mentioned the $16,000 license fee. We also are passing along all the utilities that he is responsible for. So that is 80% of the electrical bill. Water, we actually are maintaining a kind of maintenance of prior years, because what we're saying is that even if he weren't there, we still would have had some base level of water use, and so we're only gonna be charging him for that which exceeds the historical base level. Same with rubbish. Again, we have the space available to Condor Kids, we have it available to the council and Upper Ojai Relief, and so we are not directly passing along the rubbish charge to him, but only if we're seeing in excess of what historically would have been necessary.
I mean, so are we talking about two grand a month, 10 grand a month for the district, we think?
For us to just hold the property,
Just
you're
hold,
saying?
just for mothball it, yeah. What's it cost to mothball?
Well, different to mothball than what we're doing now. Right now, we're generating revenue and passing on some of the costs. So
Right.
are you saying if we were to mothball me and if we were to kick him out and just say we're gonna hold it up there?
Just gonna hold it, yeah, mothball, what do we think?
I'm not gonna speculate, but it would certainly be in the tens of thousands a year. It would not just be a couple thousand. I think, I said I'm not gonna speculate, I'm speculating. Tens of thousands, less than 100,000 would be our holding cost, just to mothball it.
Over 50, probably.
So generally, but we also, of course, run the risk of vandalism or other.
The first broken window syndrome.
Precisely, exactly.
Can I make a comment on that? Back when Dr. Baird was here, and they talked about the school, at that time, the number in his time was 30,000. To close it.
Sounds good.
And that, yeah, and that was back in
Yeah,
those.
so that'll be exceeding over 50 grand a year, okay, so 50 grand, we leave it sterile, and we spend 50 grand, and there's no use. So that's part of the alternative that we are really faced with. Okay, well. Okay, the chair, I'm not sure really how long you want this process to go on.
No, let's go. I think we've,
You wanna come to some type of a
well, I think it's
questions?
the next item on the agenda. I think we've done our, Mr. Bailey has done his presentation. We're supposed to have public comments on and ask questions, and then we move on.
Excellent. And before I step down, and sit back down, Bob, I wanted to share one quick thing. You asked, why not do a charter? And
Oh, I heard, because we don't have 86 kids.
Right.
And we don't have enough kids, and so everything else becomes a moot point. So
Yeah.
we don't have to go past that. Like I said, I'm just into numbers. This is, I'm not picking flavors.
Sure.
And so if the answer is, we don't have 86 kids, we're not gonna have 86 kids, we'll never have 86 kids.
I'm sorry, but I don't think you can say that. Because I think that Mr. Bailey's done a wonderful job with the school up there
I think
in
so,
a
too.
short amount of time, and he has over 100 kids.
But
Hey
I
guys,
think if
hold
you-
on. You know what? There's a section where it says conversation among the 7-Eleven committee
Yeah.
members.
Okay.
I think what we're supposed to do is reserve our discussion for that.
Okay.
We're just supposed, if we go down, I'm sorry to cut everybody off, but I feel like if we open this up, we're,
Yeah, right. But I
This is
wanted to,
open
what I
up a
wanted
big-
to- what I wanted to say, Bob, was, we would hope that, I have a dream that at some point the state could support this as being an option. That you could have a charter school and it could be like what we do. It just, the laws aren't there right now, and I would hope for a time in which the laws might change. So I wanna say that, I would love for this to be accessible to everybody.
And let's make it clear that it's not the OUSD.
No,
That's
it's the state of California.
It's imposing, it is the state of California
Yeah.
that dictates the laws
Oh,
that will
absolutely.
allow it.
No,
So
that's right.
I wanna make sure,
Oh, yes.
credit gets credit due, and that's up in Sacramento.
Yeah, Food,
Okay.
Mifflin, and Pearson, and all those.
Trevor, should I start the new section?
please do.
All right, so I'm gonna turn your attention to, page 11 of 32. It's the, very small font, elementary enrollment demographic data for last school year. This was a chart that we first created 2 years ago. Hadn't previously existed in the district. I find it to be one of the most powerful charts as far as sharing some pretty important information. So let me just walk you through how to read this information. I'll answer any questions and we'll move on. But the first few pages that you'll see that follow are other ways of looking at demographic information, enrollment information. This was our best way of being able to answer the question, how many kids actually reside in Upper Ojai? So we have some historical information as well as, again, last year and this year. So the way you look at this elementary enrollment demographic data on page 11, first chart is showing school of residence. It's every kid in our district, what school they would go to based on where they actually live. So Trevor, for instance, your kids obviously would be counted within the Summit column. My son would be counted in the Myers Oaks column, although he attends Miramonte. Obviously, we have a great tradition in our district of allowing families to choose the right school for them. But if we didn't allow that, which we're not allowed to actually not allow it by ed code, but that's a side point. If we didn't allow it, then this is how our enrollments would look across districts. So one thing that catches my attention immediately is that Myers Oaks is actually the highest density population area in the community. Another thing that catches my eye is if you look down in that first chart under the percentage section, demographically or ethnically, you'll see that we have actually pretty similar demographic breakdown, ethnic breakdown throughout the entire upper and lower valley. Obviously, Summit being the least, or actually I should say it has the greatest diversity, is the least like the others. But if you, well, we'll jump to the end in a little bit and you'll see that because of our pattern of allowing families to choose the school that best matches their needs, that our demographics and ethnic demographics specifically changes. So anyway, that first chart shows where kids live within our community. The second chart is the kids that don't attend the school that they live near. The school of residence. So this is, we call it intra-district, intra meaning it's within our district. So it's when someone leaves their school of residence to go to any other public school in our district. Okay? So that's, again, that's the intras out. So what that's showing is the district from which that child is leaving. The next chart is the school of attendance. So this is showing where the kids that we mentioned in chart 2, where they actually end up. So for instance, again, if we're looking at these columns, let's focus on Summit, you'll see that last year we had 6 children who resided within Summit boundaries who chose to leave Summit and go to a different school in our district. That's from chart 2. And then you can see down in chart 3 that we had 1 child who came from somewhere in the lower valley who actually chose to go up to Summit. And then chart 4 will show you the inter-district transfers, meaning the kids that come from outside our district. And so that would be that we had 13 children at Summit who came from outside the OUSD boundaries to arrive at a total of 44 kids. Now I'm going to caution, this chart was created by our new student data specialist just last week. The theme of this information is accurate. The absolute detail of each of these columns, I can't say is absolutely precise, because it's really difficult to do this sort of analysis in a look-back window to a prior year, because we have kids who are coming and going so frequent within our district that you have to choose a spot in time. But it's not as easy as you would think it would be as far as choosing that spot in time and then being able to track what the child's address was at that time. Because again, children certainly move during the year within the valley, and so that's why this is presented one way, and you'll see in a couple pages that we actually back in June provided the board an alternative way of looking at this information. Again, thematically it's the same, I don't see a material change, but you can see the actual precision will be, will not be there. Any questions on that page?
I know they got chart 2 right.
What's that?
I said I know they got chart 2 right because I recognize the 3 Caucasian intradistrict transfers being my kids.
There you go. All right, so next page, page 12. This was also polled just last week. This was an analysis of students who reside within the Summit boundaries, Upper Ojai, by grade level across the district, regardless of the school that they attend. So what you'll see is last year we had 63 kids. This was as of what we call our census day, which is in October, so this is pre-Thomas Fire. 63 kids total, of which 29 were K-5, which of course our elementary schools will all go K-5 next year. So 29 were K-5. This year we have 22 who are K-5. You'll see again the overall number that we declined by 9 students from the Upper Ojai area, Upper Ojai Valley. Again, 22 of those 54 are K-5, and the remaining 32 are middle school and high school age kids. Okay? So those 2 pieces of information were created just for you at your request from our last meeting. It was done last week. I inserted a few additional charts that were created 2 years ago or 3 years ago as part of the prior 7-Eleven committee's work. I felt that they still presented sufficiently relevant information that there was no need to recreate them or to omit them, since you guys have access to them online anyway. But this will just show you, again, a longer trend history of student attendance patterns. This chart shows you that in 2015-16, 26 of the kids that attended Summit actually resided in the Summit boundaries. In 14-15, the number was 16 kids from Upper Ojai. From 13-14, the number was 33. And from 12-13, 35. And from 11-12, we were at 25. So again, that was only the first column I was reading. That does not show the total enrollment. Total enrollment is further to the right in your materials. But again, remember the question was, can we provide information as to how many kids who reside within the area we're talking about? And fortunately, because the census is 9 years old and way pre-Thomas Fire, it's really not that relevant. And so the best way for us to get demographic information is just looking at our actual enrollment information. We don't have access. If someone never enrolls in our district and they went straight to Rock Tree Sky as a kindergartner, or they went straight to Muhu as a kindergartner, we would have no record of them for this information. So again, this information is not complete as to the whole body of children who reside in Upper Ojai. Obviously, this is only the kids who actually are attending OUSD schools. Okay. The charts starting on page 15 are again some more historical information that you see where kids are transferring to and from. So again, I'm not gonna go through every line of this, but just to take an example, you can see that in 14-15, I'm taking the second chart from the top, so I skipped the first one just to give us a new flavor to look at. 14-15, you'd see that Summit had one child who came to Summit from Miners Oaks. They had 4 children who came from the East End, from the San Antonio area. So they had 5 kids total who came to Summit from other schools. And the total Summit enrollment that year was 38. So do you see how you can look at the information in 2 separate ways? If you're looking at it from the Summit axis, or actually, I'm sorry, they had 38 children who were enrolled total. 17 of whom left the Upper Ojai area to go to another school. So 1 went to Myers Oaks, 10 went to San Antonio, 6 went to Topa. That's how I read that information. Okay, so that was the information that we provided on enrollment. So what you can see is, again, that historically we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 40 children who are elementary school age who reside up there, and of which somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 30 have chosen to go to an alternative school within the district. And in their, well, yeah. Any questions?
Excuse me, do you know the reason for that, or some of the reason?
The reason why children choose, or families choose to have their children
Yeah,
enroll in
so how it changed from a certain number to a greater number? Was that when they
Not sure I
dropped,
understand the
when they
question.
dropped from 2 teachers to, from 3 teachers to 2 teachers? What year was that?
I believe that was it was around 2012, but I'm not certain. Well, we can actually look at the enrollment. Yeah, it was after the 2012 school year. So starting in 13-14, when they were at 62 is when they went down to 2 teachers. But you'll see that there's not actually any significant change to the pattern as far as as far as intra-district changes. Perhaps we were beginning to pull fewer students not perhaps, we were pulling fewer students from Santa Paula, but that was not just as a factor of us having only 2 teachers, it was also a factor of Santa Paula closing its boundaries when they unified. Remember, Santa Paula Elementary and Santa Paula High School District unified in 2013, and at that time they said, we're not going to allow kids to leave our district, we want to maintain that ADA in our district. Okay? Alright, so yes.
Could you just repeat the figures that you said before? Historically, 20 to 40 kids up there, but how many kids chose? And then you said 10 to...
The neighborhood of
30.
10 to 30. Again,
10 to 30.
the information, I'm just giving a summary of the 6 or 7 charts that we have here. But what we typically see is that in any given year, for instance, in 15-16, 25 kids left Summit. 17 kids left Summit in 14-15, 15 left in 13-14, 22 left in 12-13, and 24 left in 11-12. So again, somewhere in the neighborhood of kind of low teens up to high 20s. Okay, if there's no questions on enrollment, I'm going to keep trekking along because I know that one of your committee commitments last meeting was that you want to keep these meetings to 2 hours, so we'll do our best to do that for you. Going past page 17, I know it was requested that you receive information on what is currently budgeted for from Measure J for the Summit site. You'll see that information here. $500,000 yet to be expended that's currently assigned for Summit. So if the district is to retain ownership of the site and certainly primary use, then we would need to be allocating these funds and actually using them to make improvements to the site. If the district enters into a lease or a potential sale of the property, then these funds would be reallocated to other school sites. Obviously, if it was a lease, it depended on the terms of the lease, whether or not the leasee would be taking on, responsibility of maintenance and repair.
In other words, if he wants to take, not spend this kind of money to repair and then fix the place, this is a big figure. You need a big capital. you know, it needs to be kept up to date. But if
Well-
you have this major J to put this money in and keep the school going, do you have these funds now?
We have the $500,000 set aside right now for Summit.
So we can do all this repair work?
We could take board action, because right now they're saying they would not want to commit those funds until we know whether or not we're gonna be using the space again. The school was closed this year, it's closed next year at a minimum, and so while the school's closed for at least these 2 years, the board is hesitant to allocate funds that could otherwise be going to serve the kids of the Ojai Unified School District, by providing for a space that right now would be not benefiting OUSD kids.
More and more every year.
So just to make certain it's understood, these budget figures, first of all, they're budgets. They're gonna, what would actually happen if we went out to bid on each of these projects, it would come in different than these numbers. These are not, bidded projects. Also, if these numbers seem higher in certain cases, I want to caution you to not use anything that you may ever have experienced in your regular life when it comes to looking at school construction costs. We first of all have to pay prevailing wage when it's a public works school construction process or project. Prevailing wage is set by the state, and just as an example, I believe when I looked at the list last time, something like a drywaller makes $70 an hour. That may not be the same rate that you would pay if you were hiring a handyman to help with some local, some house projects. So.
That's why we need tech schools.
Yeah, there's
Even as a
plenty of
nurse,
money
I
for
think
folks
it's
to go into the trade right
70
now. Okay, so if, for instance, someone else were to be doing the projects on the site, it would not necessarily come in at the same $500,000 figure. It's possible that some of these improvements made by a, whether it's a resource center type group, although depending on how that was structured, it might still be a public entity, which would have to be under Public Works. Or if it was, again, a Rock Tree Sky or a strip mall developer or whoever it might be, they would not be subject to the same many requirements that education entities have to
And
obey.
what if Rock does all this repair? They don't have to pay you any lease, do they?
If they did all of that, we would give them at least 1 year for free.
Andy, question on this.
Yeah.
Last meeting, I thought I recall you saying that some of the buildings were at the end of their life expectancy. The portable classrooms.
Portables are, so again, obviously what you see here is that we don't include, replacing those, and I don't believe we actually even have the removal. I think that we're just gonna hold on to them for now. Again, if we were to decide to use it for an alternative purpose, then we'd be having to assess whether or not to remove or, remove and just downsize, go back to what Summit historically always was. Those portables came in the 80s, that's not always what, Summit did not always have classrooms right there. So, there's other options.
Where are they gonna be, assume the board enters into a lease with Rock Tree Sky on the conditions that they wanted, which was, I think, a 3-year with 2 5 years, that's 13 years. What's the condition of the portables in 13 years? I mean, that,
Your speculation is as good as mine.
alright. Cool.
You have your Hartman Hall upgrade. What is that room used for? Hartman Hall.
We'll actually, we'll get there in a few pages. We'll talk a little bit about the people who use that room, but that's the major auditorium space for the site, the kind of meeting room. So another piece of information I've included here, now I'm on to page 19. This also came to us from the generosity of Eric Wild. We once again want to thank Eric and Larry Wild for their work 3 years ago in giving us an initial appraisal of each of our 5 elementary schools. So I included his cover letter that he wrote back in February of 16. And I did not include all 5 of his appraisals, but rather I focused it only on Summit. Again, there was a request from this committee to have some information on fair market value. I think that the request was actually focused more on rental than a potential sale. I haven't heard this committee so far talk about wanting to consider sale opportunities, but that was what this appraisal was for. And as I said before, it gets really challenging and probably outside the purview of this group have us engage and pay for what would be necessary to actually get a full, fair market value analysis on various types of uses for rent. Because obviously, again, you charge something different for rent if it was a charter school and if it was a, developer who was getting a 50-year ground lease and was able to actually put in some homes or something. I mean, it's very different, so it's a complex, it's not a single number regardless of the use, but it's contingent heavily on what the use would be. And of course, we would do an analysis if it came to the point where the board was considering doing a bid that was only for, again, a very narrowly focused use. Okay? So now, Ms. Awad, I think hopefully this answers your question a bit. So page 21 of 32, you'll see for this current fiscal year, the 5 entities which have used the space, and I think that all 5 of them in some way or another have used that Hartman Hall. Rock Tree Sky, Upper Ojai Relief, or Upper Ojai Council, Chief Peak 4-H, Sisar Mutual Water, Condor Kids. Condor Kids has had a partnership this year with Food for Thought, and so Food for Thought and Condor Kids have jointly run a program in the garden this year, but I've only identified Condor Kids because Food for Thought wasn't actually on our paperwork. So those are the 5 groups that we have record of using the space this year. When I go back and look at the historical facility rentals over the past 5 years, this really is the same suspects that you would have seen back then, with the exception of Upper Ojai Relief, which obviously has stemmed since the fire. But Chief Peak, Sisar Mutual Water, and the PTA, now Condor Kids, are the primary users of the space.
Could there be any fees or something to the usage of those rooms, that room? Or you just let them use it for free?
We have an entire facility rental policy that has rates depending on the entity that would be using it. So depending on the type of entity that is using it, we do charge a fee that goes anywhere from minimum recovery of cost, meaning that we're not going to lose money by having you use a space that then we have to go pay for custodial to clean up, that sort of thing. So we have no cost for certain entities. We have recovery of our cost for some entities, and then we have a fair market rate. If Patagonia wanted to host a movie screening at Summit, we'd love to host them, and we would charge them what a very profitable corporation would pay. Okay, so then the next thing, again, this is some recycled material, but I think a lot of our staff in this district put a lot of time in over the past 5 years on various topics, and so I felt it warranted inclusion here. Starting on page 22, you'll see what we called our BACs, instead of frequently asked questions, our board asked questions. This came from a board meeting on June 6th, the night that the board chose to close Summit School for this current school year. They had asked us a number of questions over the period in which we were analyzing the school site, whether or not to maintain it open or to close it. And so these questions were direct administrator responses to board member questions. So this is where I'll just draw the first bit of information, again, not relevant for you guys. We can see that we were answering some academic questions. But if you go to page 25 of 32, this is another chart that's showing similar information to what we were talking about earlier as far as enrollment. And this is where I was saying that the theme is the same from the charts that you looked at earlier. It may not be identical numbers. For instance, if you're looking at 17-18, you'll see that we identified 15 students who, for whom the School of Residence was Summit who transferred out. I'm looking at the very bottom line of that chart on page 25. But if you look back on your prior materials that we're talking about, we only identified 6. I believe that these numbers in this chart on page 25, if you are wanting absolute precision and accuracy, then this chart would be the go-to chart to use. This one's going to be more accurate than the one in which we just did, trying to look backward in time. But again, thematically, they're the same. What you see is, last year, 45 kids who reside in the Upper Ojai, of which 15 transferred out. It's identifying at the time that this was done, as of our census day in October, no kids had transferred in from other parts of the district. and we had 13 inter-district transfers from outside our district. And again, if you are wanting to see that number that we talked about earlier as far as the students who reside in Upper Ojai, it's again that first column, somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 up to 65, and then you can see the number of kids who leave Upper Ojai or left Summit to instead attend a different school within our district. That number hovered as low as 7 back in 08, 09, and as high as in the, again, low to mid-20s. Yes?
In the third paragraph below the chart, that projection of 24 students, was that for the school year of 2019?
That's right.
Because
So-
we're looking back, closing, this is June, and then we're projecting.
That's exactly right. So that was what the board was deliberating back last June, was we were looking at our enrollment with much lower than expected kindergarten enrollment, as well as more children who had left during the year, intra-year. Transfers, as well as we knew that we were having a large outgoing 6th grade cohort. I mean, that cohort had as high as 13 kids in it at certain points during their time at Summit from K-6. And so as a result, by early May, we realized that we were only at 24. And that's when, as you'll see in the narrative here, we began holding some parent meetings. I held one with the principal at the time, Marilyn Smith, with families of students up there. And after that meeting where we shared with them that we were looking at 24 students and wanted to get a sense from them whether or not it was going to still be the right environment for them to send their children, 5 families or 5 students decided to unenroll their child at Summit for this current school year and to pursue alternative environment for them. So we were down to 19. And it looks like we had one more right after a meeting which took place with Cheryl and Marilyn went back up there about a week later. So by the time the board was actually analyzing it, we only had 18 children who would have been enrolled in the school for this current year. Of those 18, you'll see on page 26 at the very top, question number 6, 9 of the 18 kids were OUSD kiddos. Of the other 9 who were not OUSD kiddos, 3 reside within the boundaries of Santa Paula, and 6 were traveling, I apologize, it's typo, 6 were traveling from Fillmore. They had been displaced prior to the fire. It wasn't fire related that had them moved during the year. But we had, again, 18 kiddos total, 9 of whom were still residing within the district, 9 who were out, and that was what the board was looking at when they made the decision to close the school.
So we had 9 in-district
Elementary
children
age kids that were going to attend
that
Summit.
were going to enroll.
That's right. That's right.
I think that was only 3 or 4 families,
Right.
because 2 of them have 3 kids.
Right. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. I mean,
That's not very many families.
that's right. Okay, so again, I'm not going to rehash too many of these questions because much of it's not relevant for your deliberation, although it may be just interesting to you guys since I know you all have an interest in this topic. As far as other information within the BAQs, you'll see that we did do an analysis starting on page 28 on the cost to run Summit during the 17-18 school year. And so you can see that, last year before they, when we had 42 kids, before they were down at the 24 number at 42 kids with only 2 teachers and a part-time administrator, the cost to run the school was $356,000. If you include the overhead of a district, $380,000 total, once you add in some of those costs, which again, those costs are pretty heavily underestimated, but we wanted to have it be a fair analysis. And you can compare that with, I imagine I have it in here. I'm not seeing it right now, but the total revenue for the district was for the school was about $320. So even if you don't include the district's kind of overhead, our warehouse driver would go up there, Chuck and his team would go up there to mow, those sorts of, when I say overhead, I'm not talking about my cost. Obviously the district's gonna have my cost regardless of Summit, but some of the other positions, nutrition services that did actually see a reduction as a result of the closure, that it was either a matter of the school did not bring in sufficient revenue to cover its cost by an order of about $35,000 or about $55,000.
But your bond has income coming.
I'm sorry?
You have bond money coming in.
So bond money is totally distinct from what we're talking about here. Bond money can't go toward actual operating expenses.
So that's structure on that.
Right.
I'm on that committee. Oh, we got relieved last night. That's done. It's settled. So, Mr. Chief, we're finished.
Mission was achieved. It was a great meeting.
Andy, can I ask you a question on the
Yeah.
standards that are nearly met and the standards that are met? These are the basic. Are these the smarter, balanced assessment? What are the standards? I guess that's the question.
Yeah. So again, we're starting to step beyond necessarily what your deliberations are over, but I'll answer.
I'm going to tie it in,
and
and the reason why I'm asking you this.
So a few years ago we went to a new testing system, the Smarter Balanced. It's the CASP testing is what we call the actual testing. They have 4 categories for student achievement. Obviously we have our state level standard, and so they say either you're a 1, 2, 3, or 4. A 3 or a 4 means that you're meeting the standard for a grade level. That would be a 3. A 4 would be you're exceeding the standard. A 1 and a 2 means that you're falling short of the standard. So if you see here, when we say standard met, that's saying that the state grade level standard.
And then, if I understood Mr. Bailey correctly, his program does not use any of these standards.
That's right. Well, they may use some, but they're not required by law, and they're not necessarily doing it in the same way that we would be. But
Yeah, the families, that's on the families and the homeschool charter school program they're enrolled in. Those kids are doing standards there and turning in standards-based work and taking the CASP test
Okay.
as well. But our program is doing something different, has a different mission.
If I could add, so, this is part of the California accountability model. We're held accountable to make sure that our students meet certain criteria each year on the testing. We have a lot of hoops we have to jump through if our students don't meet that criteria, whereas your program would never have to jump through any hoops to try to make sure these kids are meeting the criteria.
Correct.
You would still support them in meeting the criteria, but you don't have the accountability.
That's between the family and the charter school.
All right.
And that's a different question than what we're here for.
I know, I agree, but I think it's relevant when we get into our discussions about some issues and where the committee makes their recommendations and whether we'll get there. I don't want to go into that right now.
So, Jim, I hope you do not take offense to what I'm about to say.
Okay.
If you do, I apologize in advance. Not to in any way say that these are the same programs, because obviously they're distinct, but I think it is confusing at times that people do still see Rock Tree Sky as a school, despite the fact that Jim said at least 4 different times it is not. So I would say that his program is far more akin to a YMCA than it is to a school. It is purely enrichment. It's not daycare. They're doing really engaging, great activities, recreation activities. But it really again, do you agree with again? You're not YMCA. You're much different and really cool. YMCA is too. But I mean, it really is better to analogize to something in that arena than it is to call it a school and think that it plays by any of the same rules that we as schools play by.
I think that's largely fair. I mean, we do offer, like YMCA might offer tutors, so that they might be there too. There is that piece, and we have kids do strictly educational things that they want to do while they're there. But that is a much better analogy in terms of, where you're not having to be responsible to this larger body.
Okay. All right. So the last page that we have for your materials, then we have a nice, solid half hour or so for you guys to, discuss where you feel you're at in the process, if there's more information that you need. But this page was Kathy, our excellent minutes taker for the first meeting, tried to capture the sentiment in the room when we were asking for what additional information was desired or requested. And so this entire list was what she captured. I redlined, struck the items which I felt that we've answered in this packet to the best of our ability. If you feel that something is redlined that shouldn't be, that there's still more information you need, then please make that clear. And I will tell you whether or not we're actually able to get that additional information, because perhaps we didn't perfectly meet what the request was, but we met in the way that we are capable of meeting it. So is there anything, I guess the first question, is there anything that's still in black which at this point should be removed from the list as far as additional information which you guys need for your consideration, as far as work that I can work with our new chair on trying to build our next agenda?
I guess this is one I brought up. How do zoning considerations affect? The zoning's everything, and that's a public land use, and that is a county item. And we won't be seeing the strip center there, and we won't be seeing 99% of the things that you see in town, just because of the location and the actual zoning. And that's a county issue, so it's gonna be really difficult to repurpose this into a much higher usage, where you can get a good rate of return, you can get a much higher value, you can get a much higher rent. That's almost, that's really pretty much non-existent. When you're talking about getting more money for the actual site, that's gonna be a real stretch to do that.
You know, Bob, I had something to add on to that as well, and I kept thinking about it during the presentation, and that is, suppose this committee wants to consider selling the property, which I'm hoping we can put to bed tonight in this time period, but where is that 1.25 acre property line, and where is the 4.17 acre property line? And can the committee say, well, you could sell the 4.17 and keep the 1.25? For
We have a
example.
schematic of that in here.
Yeah, so that line is in here. We have the, looks like right there.
I see it, but I'm
Do you
wondering.
want me to actually draw like a kind of Google Earth picture of the site? it's
Yeah,
easier
so
to
I'm
see?
looking at page 20 of the of our presentation materials, and I'm just wondering if that's an option to this committee to make that recommendation to the school board, and if they did do it, does the property line cut, for example, right in half of the school, or where exactly is that
Well,
line?
they do have a plot map on here, not that map, but I don't know what page it's on.
This
A regular plot map.
43?
43 of us.
Well,
Does that
that's
show,
what I-
does that accurately reflect though where
I
the
think
property
it-
line is?
I think it came from the book.
Okay,
that
well then, so
county
there we go.
book.
All right, and I'm assuming the zoning purposes would be the same for the both properties,
It's the
that's what
same
made me
zone-
think of
It's the
that.
same zone, public land,
Yeah,
PL zone.
okay.
So, yeah, Bob and Trevor, both your comments certainly well noted, well taken. I think it is important for this group to understand that, again, that your role as a recommending body is not to actually get into the weeds on that sort of, information. I think what Bob has said
Yeah, we
is
don't-
completely
we're
accurate.
done. We
Yeah,
don't- we don't
exactly.
need
You're,
to go.
you're accurate in what you're saying. I think that was actually a sufficient, I'm not sure there's anything more that would be of value I could bring to the conversation on this topic. I think it's important for you guys to understand that your role is to make a recommendation to the board about the types of uses that you would like to see. Allow the board to figure out the extent to which those are feasible when they're working with potential users of the space, whether they're a developer or, again, licensee, renter, whatever it might be.
Quick question, where, the money that, any revenues that were brought in, would that be going towards the general budget, or how?
Great
does that-
question. So if we sell a property, all of those revenues must go into an equivalent fund like Measure J that can only go toward capital improvements. So even if it's the unimproved parcel that's the field, if we sold that, that has to go for facility improvements elsewhere, which elsewhere could include the main Summit buildings. If we are renting it, regardless of the duration, as long as it's 99 years or less, it goes into our operating fund. And so that can go toward teacher salaries, that can go toward new curriculum, that can go towards any purpose that the district has as part of our operating budget.
Great, thank you.
Last question, what is the legal definition of surplus property? That's the first question we have to answer. What does that mean, surplus property?
Surplus property means that the district does not need to maintain all, your attorney, you know, the whole bundle of sticks as far as property rights.
Right.
We do not need to maintain exclusive property rights, property use of that space for at least a period of 30 days.
Okay.
So if we wanted to entertain, again, right now, the reason that we cannot enter into a lease with Jim or any other group for more than a 30-day period is that that requires the property to be identified as surplus. So that should be your working definition. If the district, if you feel a district has the ability to lose out on some of its property interest, which means that once you're renting it, you don't have the ability, I couldn't, host the teacher barbecue there, at the end of the year without working with whoever's using the space as the renter. So, once you start ceding property rights for any period in excess of 30 days, you'd have to deem it surplus.
Okay, cool.
So again, that's why when I say, I'm not just joking, I mean, Jim right now has no property rights, expectation on that property. Nor does anyone else, Condor Kids, Upper Ojai Council. If we decide tomorrow to end all of those, arrangements, the district has that ability.
What about if you lease it to Jim, the lease can include use of Upper Ojai Council,
Of course,
Condor Kids, or
Certainly.
whatever, and
No
you
question.
can restrict him to certain
that's right.
classrooms.
That's exactly correct. Right. So we have the ability to structure a lease in whatever way the board felt most appropriate with the recommendation from you guys. So if the recommendation of this committee was, we believe that the board should identify this property as surplus. I'm just gonna actually lay out the whole scenario again. I'm not suggesting this is where you guys should go, but just to make sure everyone understands. This committee could put forward a recommendation, the property should be deemed surplus for the next 5 years or 3 years. Or, you could, if you want to limit it, otherwise you could say indefinitely, until such time at which enrollment, significantly changes. But that's just for now say, we put forward to the board that this should be surplus for the next 5 years. We believe that a program like Rock Tree Sky or similar enrichment center for school-aged children should be a primary user of the space while, during the school day, while allowing for use of the buildings, in the evenings for community purposes or other prior tenants or that sort of thing. You could restrict, his ability to lease the property can still be restricted to a particular time of day. So that's not only something that you do as a license agreement, you can also say, you're leasing it, but under the stipulation, you must make it available 10 times a year for this group, or you must make it available every night for any group as long as it's starting at 5 p.m. or later. Those sorts of provisions or restrictions could be placed on the license agreement. Okay?
What about you could lease it for the school year only, and the summer it was available for other things?
Again, all of that is on the table as possibilities of what you guys could recommend, and ultimately what the board chooses to adopt.
Can we have now we're down to 15 minutes. We're trying to keep this to 2 hours. Let's open. I'm sorry to cut you off, but
I'm happy to cut off.
okay, cool. Because we want to go into our period where we have a discussion, right? And I think that's where you were going, so that's why I was trying to get us in there. And we only have 15 minutes. So we're on item 6. It says committee members will have the opportunity to converse regarding the information presented and discuss items for inclusion on the next agenda. Something I wanted to let everyone know of is that I, with Mr. Cantwell's blessing, reached out to Steve Bennett's office and asked him to put together some type of meeting where we could talk about the Oakview Community Center and how that was formed. And so that meeting is April 8th at his offices. And for anyone who's, I guess...
We can only have less than a quorum. So
right.
If others were going to join you, it could only be
less than a quorum.
5 members.
All right, so the first 5 that want to go, or less than 5, the first...
4 plus you would be 5.
Okay, so we can't have more than 5, right? Okay, so the first 4 that want to go, it's at 2 p.m. at the Government Center on April 8th. If you could,
Monday after spring break.
yeah, if you could let me know. I think we should. The first item is, does this property constitute surplus property? Because that's what we're tasked with figuring out. And then secondly, what are the uses that we support? And I'm hoping that before we can establish uses, but that should be on the table, and we should consider the information that they're gonna present to us. Cause I think,
So perhaps Trevor and whoever else wants to go to that meeting on the 8th could then report back to the entire group so that those who are not able to attend can hear
Right.
that information. So that
Well,
could be a formal agenda item.
what I'm gonna do is ask them to come here and give a presentation much like you did, because then we can all pepper them with questions, and rather than ask us and then us go ask them. But let's include that on the next agenda item if we could, if that's okay with everyone else.
I think then we also ought to include somebody to talk from the Upper Ojai Council, because they voted what they would like to see in the community already,
Yeah,
and it wasn't that. So I think that they ought to be included. I don't know who that is. Maybe Alistair would talk about that.
I don't, well, the Upper Ojai Council has a board. Alistair's not necessarily on the board.
Okay,
I don't
well,
think.
whoever, but I mean, if you're promoting Oakview, I mean, I don't see how that's a conflict of interest as I see it.
I'm not necessarily promoting, I'm just wanting to get all the information available so we can consider it when we're thinking about the uses that we support. But let's first answer the first question: does this property constitute surplus property? And then we can move on to.
How about,
the
before
next
that,
question.
making a list of what it could be used for? The
Well, I was-
possibilities, before we consider it surplus.
Well, you know what, I think that's kind of the cart before the horse. Because it's irrelevant. If we say it's not surplus, why go into that discussion?
Right.
Because that doesn't have any merit. So I'd like us to consider, if it's something that is surplus, then how many different ideas do you have for it? If it's not surplus, then none of the ideas are valid.
Right. Yeah, I
So
agree.
is
I
that
think that's
fair?
why it's in this order.
Okay, so I'd like us to pursue it in that order.
Could we perhaps get us not a consensus, but an idea of where we are as a committee on that and what our feelings are before we start to engage in a further discussion on it?
On the surplus, you mean?
It's proper for you to take a straw vote, I think, that's not
Yeah,
binding.
does everyone understand what the definition is? It's to not maintain exclusive use for a period of more than 30 days. So I guess we can, seems to me that it's self-evident that it's surplus property because it's not being used by the school, right? It's, if we could take a straw vote, I mean, I would say that it is clearly surplus property,
I would agree with you.
right?
I agree.
Well, take a straw poll,
Okay.
or make a motion. Does somebody wanna make a motion?
Well, it's
I'm
not
in-
gonna be an action item because we don't have it actually agendized as
We
an
don't have
action
an
item.
agenda.
This
So
is
we
the
could
ground
take a
body,
str-
but-
so we
but
could
what
take a
you've just
straw.
done is totally legitimate. You just would not take action. Again, you're not gonna take action in all likelihood until the point at which you're ready for the whole, report. But clearly you guys have given yourself a sense that you believe it's the first of your steps are identified.
And I think one of the things that we're supposed to do is determine what's to be on the next agenda, right?
Right.
So why don't we ask that be included in the next
Well,
agenda?
if you take a straw vote and you know which way you're going, then you'll know what needs to be on the next agenda.
Well, in order for it, I think for us to move on to question 2, we should officially decide as a committee, and someone should formally make a motion, and then it should be decided, because I think that would,
So
I'd like it to be reflected in the
I
minutes.
make a motion to add that we determine if it's a surplus property on the agenda.
On the-
Would that be on the agenda?
Right.
Is that-
Doesn't mean.
Doesn't need to go that far?
As long as committee makes the request, it's on there.
All
Okay.
right, great, so that'll be
Yeah,
on there.
You made the.
Just so you guys know procedurally, the chair, one of the privileges of the chair is that he does set the agenda in consultation with staff. And so he's taking this feedback from you guys right now to set the agenda. If any committee member, it's if 2 committee members make the request for a specific item, then it does need to be on there. So if someone said, we must have Steve Bennett or someone from his office, or at least the topic on our next agenda, but everyone else disagreed, then it doesn't have to go onto the agenda. The chair would have the ability to say, sorry, it doesn't look like there's interest, so that's how it works. So, but not everything that's discussed here tonight, it's possible that, that we will add things to the agenda in the coming days as we review notes and everything else.
Okay, good, so surplus property is on the next agenda, right? And then I think given what the committee's inclination is, we should also include on the next agenda to start considering uses that we will support and start intaking all the information that we can
Yes.
and making a
That's good.
list of those so we can move this committee along.
And you're gonna add that then. That suggestion is gonna be actually an agendized item, you're gonna request that as an agendized. So it will be determined of surplus.
Right.
And then of all eligible uses for the zoning site.
That's what it says on page 3 of our booklet, that that's number 2. What we are supposed to do is establish a priority list of uses that we will support. I'm just kind of
Right, and I'm
paraphrasing.
asking
But
that you're gonna put that on the agenda so
I'm
we
just
can formalize
making sure
it.
it's okay with everyone
Yeah.
else. I think we should.
Yes.
I
We're
think
okay with that.
absolutely in the
Okay.
interest of moving forward in a timely fashion, we want to make sure that we're able to vote on that
Right.
sooner than later.
So then you have those 2 items.
Okay, and
And
then,
then the Bennett,
Presentation.
anything you can do to get Bennett or anybody else here, or the upper council or anybody else, would then be able to discuss different ideas
to start
for
floating.
alternative use, if in fact it's declared surplus.
So I'm imagining the next meeting, we determine that it's surplus. Then we start talking about the uses that we're gonna support, and we're gonna wanna have all of the information that we can to help us make that determination in that list. And one of those things would be information from Bennett's office, information from, what's the lady that formed the Oakview community?
Barbara Kennedy.
Barbara Kennedy, information from Condor Kids, we've heard from Mr. Bailey, all these different ideas that come to mind, and whatever else anyone can think of, let's get them here and have them.
Am I to understand in our conversation today that because there is not 40 or 80 kids living in the boundaries of Summit School, that a charter school could not go in that property? Did I understand that correctly?
So, a few nuances to it, but
86.
yeah, you're generally, some of the sentiments correct, so it's, 86, not 80. It's not just about kids residing in the area, but kids who are actually signing up to be in that classroom-based program.
Got it.
So again, if there's.
That
if
or
of
a
the-
charter school?
What's that?
Like that classroom like as Summit School, or that classroom as a charter school?
No, so a charter would have to first form, which is a burdensome task, but if a charter was able to assemble, they then would have to identify 86 kids who actually are submitting enrollment paperwork to say that they want to go to this school. And they would be unenrolling from our district to enroll into their school.
And is that?
And only in that case would we be forced to have that charter have a right to the property before other uses. The district could still say that even a charter with 35 kids, it was the right thing to do was to make the space available to them. But their hand is not tied, and so that would be one of the things for you guys to weigh in on. Do you think a charter that only had 25 kids from Upper Ojai would be a good tenant for that space, or would it be something different? Like that would be something next week for you guys to weigh in on.
So 86 kids within Summit School boundaries?
Within
Or-
OUSD boundaries.
Okay, that's what I
who are
wanted to
attending the
clarify.
charter.
Got it, wanted to
But-
clarify that. Okay,
But they
thank
don't
you.
have to be attending OUSD schools, right?
No, they just have to
Do
reside
that-
within our boundaries.
Okay.
So again, if there was 100 kids who lived in Upper Ojai, which we don't have, we don't have that many, at least right now, that are connected to public education. If there was 100 kids, but only 20 were interested in the charter, then that doesn't meet, it's not about how many kids live up there, it's about they have to live in Ojai, OUSD boundaries, and enroll in the charter.
Got it.
And at that point, the charter gets some really strong rights for negotiating. They still have to pay, not an insignificant amount in rent,
Right.
but they'd have guaranteed rights. If it's something less than that amount where a charter formed, and again, they had 25 kids, then you guys, again, that would be something for you guys to decide. Do you want to include that on your list, that a charter school should be, considered,
I
that sort of
just
thing?
want to understand that.
And the
Okay,
next
thank you.
Did
meeting's
I answer it? That makes sense?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, thank you.
The next meeting's April 10th. That's like so soon. And that's only 2 days after we meet with Bennett's office, so I don't know. The email that he, or Cindy, his staff sent me said that it seemed to me that they wanted more information about whether or not the school could, I don't know, they wanted some questions answered, but I don't think they're gonna be prepared by April 10th to come and give us information.
What day of the week is that,
The 10th? It's our meeting.
Oh, wait,
The-
the 8th is.
The 8th is
Monday.
Monday, I believe.
It's the first Monday.
So I'll say, if you're looking for them to give you guys guidance about how they would do it up there, that is gonna be taking them a long time, and that's where they need questions from us answered, which we would not be prepared to answer till this group finishes their work.
Right.
So I think what the meeting should be really about is help us know what happened for Oakview, so that way you guys have information to decide whether or not you think that there is the possibility of doing it up there. But even that, your recommendations of the board are not bound by what your imagination thinks is likely or not likely to actually happen. Does that make sense? If you guys said that you wanted to support a casino hotel up there, we all know there's zero chance of that happening, but if you want to put that forward, you don't need to already go through all logistical steps of how are we gonna make this happen. All you have to do is let the board know that you believe this is something that warrants further investigation.
But it should be realistic, I mean.
Well, what about if we wanted the school district to present a magnet program up there, or some other kind of program?
So then that would go back to the idea that this wasn't surplus property, because you're saying that the district should be doing something up there. So that would be a separate conversation then, that the district becomes a user of the space after it's surplus. But again, that's really not what this group is tasked with. The answer, as far as the district currently has no plans for use of that space as far as reopening a school.
So by definition, it's surplus. I mean, they're answering that question for us.
Yeah,
But,
you got that.
we're tasked with that, so we have to determine.
That's why
is-
they're elected.
Well, I
The
mean,
board's elected.
yeah, it's, okay, and is there anything else that the committee wants? Any information that they want before the next meeting that we can start thinking about in order to formulate our list of uses of the property? We've heard from the user of the property. What else?
I'm just gonna say, I can talk to Barbara Kennedy, who helped with the resource center in Oakview. It's a very similar situation. That's the only reason I refer to her, is that was a school that Ventura Unified closed, and the community came and surrounded and created this. So I look to her as a suggestion and to listen to, and how they saved the property from being sold to developers and whatnot, and preserve what they have there. It's a really, you've been there, right?
I've been there, I met with
Yeah,
Barbara.
wonderful,
I
wonderful.
wanted to know how she did what she did too.
Yeah, so
Elementary
I think I
school.
could probably get her
No,
to
it's a
come
community
and
center.
talk to us
Kindergarten there.
at the
You
next
did?
meeting. I think I could get her to come to that. Can we put that on the agenda, to have her
But
come,
there's-
and I can follow up with you, Chairman Trevor,
Yeah,
to,
just shoot me an email and we'll get it on
on the
the
agenda?
agenda, I think.
For a
I'll
presentation.
email it
For
to
a
Emily.
presentation.
And then she has longer than 3 minutes legally.
Yeah, as a presentation, so that she can explain what she did there, so there's a better understanding, since,
But there are schools in the county that became charter schools too when the school closed. Like Cape, I think it's Camarillo, it's a K through 8. I mean, I don't know how they got there either, but the school closed. But I don't think didn't end up through Camarillo School District, it went through some other school district.
Do you want someone
But
to
I don't know
come-
anything about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's-
I just know that it went from a closed school to a charter school.
It seems to me, just from listening, that you are, you want some type of school there.
I want a public school.
Okay,
I mean, I know I want a public school.
but I think the board has already decided that issue. And,
What do you mean?
well, the school is closed and
Well, the
we're,
school is closed today,
okay.
but it's not closed permanently, and it's not leased.
Well, then, if it's voted on that, whether or not this constitutes surplus property, your vote would be no.
No, I don't necessarily would vote no. I want a public school there, though. A charter is a public school a charter is a free public school.
Well, I think if you.
Is that right? Do I have that right? I mean, it's not, it's a free public school,
Okay, but I guess,
and it would have to be surplus first, right?
Yeah, and so,
Alright.
and that's the question.
If
Could I add on, because I've been to that schools and I've been to these schools,
yeah,
and they're incredibly different. And so if we're gonna
What
talk,
schools are you referring to?
Charter
I'm,
schools?
I'm talking about the government center, the community center in Oakville.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so we take a look at the schools, we take a look at the property, we take a look at the matrix of what it is. And so I think one of the things, if we're gonna have a presentation, we really need to understand when you get into the main area and the other rooms, the actual physical size and constraints, because I believe that that unit down there has a much bigger meeting facility, and I believe
it
it has a
does.
much bigger access.
Yeah.
And I believe it has a huge outside recreation barbecue facility. So I don't want us to be measuring two things that are significantly different. It's okay to have the same concept, but don't let anybody believe these are the same, because they're really not. That thing down there is 2.5, maybe more size bigger.
You're talking about Oakville.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a gym.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Basketball.
and I'm saying all that, so,
Yeah.
so what happens is, with the size and with the use and with the weddings and with all the other things, anniversaries and everybody's doing, and the amount of people there in the public, I mean, if you can swing that up there, great. But I think they're significantly different, the amount of money's different, the rent's different, you know, just the entire infrastructure. And so I'm not against it, I'm just for accurate information, for comparison, so we don't lead people to believe that this is literally actually available, because they are different animals. Okay?
So it would be good to get her to say how many,
How much rent do we bring in
Yeah,
every
yeah,
year?
yeah.
How many days a year do we have? What do we charge? I've been to weddings there, I've been to meetings
Yeah.
there, I've been to water meetings and tons of other meetings.
Do
and-
they,
and
does the Oakview Community Center, suppose they had a Jim Bailey there? I mean, is that a possibility to,
yeah.
it seems to me like he's got,
They have the
a
Boys and
strong-
Girls Center that runs out of there. So
Right.
it's similar-ish.
And
I used to
again,
run a program through there for the Ohio Valley Youth Foundation. We had a youth leadership project, and we used some of that space. We used the room there. It was great.
yeah, and I'm not saying there's not room for RTS and all the other things,
Right.
and to have it rented as a community center, and to have it as multi-purposed. That's gonna be something that school board is gonna determine. I just wanna make sure that we don't go through this exercise, school board has some questions, we have no answers,
yeah.
right?
Well-
Oh, I see what you're saying.
to
Yes.
get
It's,
the
Fully
it's
understand.
past 7:30, so for the list of uses, do you want some information from someone about, talking about a charter school for the next meeting? And if so,
Sure, for the Summit Charter School.
okay, and where do we get that information so that this committee can
Well, we'll
hear it?
have, someone talk, probably my daughter,
Okay, and so then,
and maybe Mary Ann.
great. And that will be an item that is included on the agenda? And then they can give a presentation and we can have questions? And what else?
A piece of information that I'd like to have is really what amount of money can each group bring in? So you were saying there's different levels based on the use. I think it would be
Well,
interesting to really.
That's very different when we're talking about actually, again, renting something as opposed to
Okay.
the facility rentals that we currently do, the license or the rental that we do for just an afternoon to use a classroom or that sort of thing. Again, I don't know that we're gonna have the ability in part, because again, it's something that could easily cost $10,000 to actually run, very complex, financial analyses of different uses and what their likely rental income would be. So my recommendation to this board or this committee would be to deliberate and discuss the extent to which you feel like, where you want to balance the two competing things of best use that's most agreeable with the community with maximizing revenue for the district, so that way, again, we can offer the most enriching academic programs within our own schools. So I don't know that we'll be able to tell you with certainty that, Rock Tree Sky, we're gonna get 50,000 from, because I'm gonna try to get 100,000 out of them, and I'm not gonna necessarily say the number here. And that the, The resource center, we were gonna do what Ventura did, which was actually sell the property to the entity doing it, and Ventura Unified got fair market value on the sale of that property.
Okay.
So, I mean, there are different things, and so I don't know that it's how beneficial it is to try to
Yeah.
speculate on each of these. Instead, I think you guys need to decide, you know, if we had an opportunity to double the revenue potential, but it's something that, you know, was our third favorite option, do we think that the extra revenue for this district would be worth it? Or do we say, you know, look, we'd be okay with it going out for $1, because really this is such a jewel of a community space for the Upper Ojai community that we need to focus more on those priorities than getting somewhere between $16,000 and $100,000 a year on, you know, rental income, that sort of thing.
Okay, I guess given the zoning limitations, that's where I keep coming back to. It sounds like we have a very specific pool that we'd be choosing from.
Well, that's assuming that we couldn't have it rezoned for a period of time. I mean, not to say it's not an easy process. I mean, it definitely it has additional hurdles. But let's say that this group, looking at this information, says, I don't see a way in which it's not just 3 years out that we're all of a sudden gonna have 90 kids who want to go to Summit School. We're looking at, you know, perhaps generationally until there's something that significantly changes. So we would support a, you know, up to a 10-year rental agreement without having to, you know, without having to restrict our ability to reopen a school down the road if we ever had the kids. But we're not, it's tough to see a path where we have the kids very soon. If you guys got to that place, and so your recommendation was a 10-year commitment on the property, I could certainly see individuals who want to use that space, including potentially as a resource center, who would have the ability politically and the time and potentially some resources to try to do whatever is necessary to rezone for whatever uses we're gonna need to be, you know, a conditional use permit for a period of 10 years, that sort of thing.
So
You can
just to
get-
be,
What's that?
to be clear then, if we look at it as surplus going out for a further extended period of time, the greater opportunity we might being the key word there for additional revenue.
With certainty, that's right.
With certainty.
Right, because
Okay.
again, if we're making it available, let's just go to the extreme of what we did with this property, we're accepting 99-year leases here. We're getting people who are gonna level buildings, potentially, and put up brand new ones that either, you know, the ideas have been talked about publicly for the past 5 years, people have talked about put affordable housing here, put, you know, a hotel here, put a theater, performing arts center. Those sorts of things start to
Over
become
my dead body.
Those things become viable though if you are looking at a longer term commitment of the property. So if
Okay.
this group said, again, it's just hypothetically say, you said, you know, we don't envision a situation in the next generation where this is gonna change. It really is gonna take a lot of different things happening before the school would be needed. We would support a 25-year commitment on the property. There could be a lot of people who would have ways in which they could solicit a conditional use permit for an alternative use over that period of time.
Great, thank you.
And so could the school with OUSD employee housing.
Right, yeah, exactly. All
They're
those are
now
possibilities.
able to restrict and limit it to federal housing rules and limit it specifically to those people that are employed. And not just teachers, I'm talking about employed. So,
That's right, there's lots of other options once you start looking at longer periods, which this group, again, that's one of the things we're tasked with, is put forward guidance to the board to help them be informed of what this community supports as far as whether or not we're only looking at a 1 or a 2 year lease, or a, you know, 10 to 20 year, or again, 99. That's the sort of thing that would be really helpful for this group to, and again, I'm doubtful that you're gonna come to a consensus on a particular period. You might each have your own opinion, and that would be fine to share with the board as well. But that's, again, one of the purposes of this community committee is to tell the board, what do we support as far as a long-term obligation on that property?
And on that note, can we take a straw poll if there's anyone who is even thinking about selling the property, is making that recommendation to the board? Is there anybody here that is
do
even?
you understand the process of that? It's gotta go to
I-
this
I-
nonprofit, this nonprofit.
I know, but
this
I just wanna,
agency.
remember I said I wanna put that matter to bed?
Sure.
Cause I really wanna, is there anyone here who thinks that we should even consider that option? No,
Not without a compelling argument.
Jessica? No, okay.
I can talk to the bank, Trevor.
Well,
There you
I
go.
mean, I'm just thinking of where we're
Where
like
we're
going
going,
on
yeah,
this committee, and we have this thing from Eric Wild in there, and Okay, good,
I mean,
so,
maybe I might want to back that up a little bit. I would be with Kate if there's a very compelling argument that is beneficial for the community.
Like what?
I don't
Well,
know.
again, the Resource
knows?
Center was sold.
Not sure
The
what it is,
Resource
but if
Center
there
was
was an
sold.
argument-
Simplified does not own the
wanna
Resource
hear
Center
it.
in Lakeview, it was sold.
The district sold it to, it was a tax thing
At
and blah,
fair,
blah, 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 blah.
at fair market value.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
At fair market value.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's.
well, let's hear what they have to say, but I think, we're nowhere this committee's going. So we'll see, let's adjourn the meeting, we'll see everyone on the tenth,
So,
we'll
one
have,
thing, Trevor, again, just in the interest of thinking through the next multiple meetings, do you think that this committee should be prepared potentially at the end of those? I could envision, it sounds like we have 3 or 4 presentations, maybe we have them around 15 minutes each, then give you guys an hour to talk. Should this committee be prepared to potentially stake a position on the acceptable uses at the end of next meeting, which would then be circulated to the community, you'd have a public hearing, and you'd finally take an updated stance based on the public hearing? Or do you think that you're still at least a meeting out from that? Because it's possible
I
that-
think we're one meeting out from it.
So have a
I-
meeting next week, and then the following one would be the one where you guys actually start thinking about stances, and then that would have to have a public hearing follow.
What do you guys think?
I agree.
Be able, I guess the question is, after next meeting, are we gonna be able to take a stance on, here's our list of uses that we support, and then we have to put that out to the public and have a public hearing on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or
And
whatever.
where
it is.
would we declare it surplus in order to take all that information to
I
make
think
that
that's the
viable?
first
Yeah.
item on the agenda. is-
Right.
Because, yeah, and then one of the things I'm gonna recommend, and that young man over there might be able to help you. If we're gonna do this, the school website's a good website, but not a lot of people are gonna look at our 7-Eleven website. He can probably get a sequencing where we can put it in the paper,
What's
Mhm.
that?
and we can notify those people that are stakeholders that wanna come, have a discussion, give presentation. So somebody, I would hope, would,
You know,
Get with
social
our-
media is pretty good at that. We had
Oh.
a,
get with our reporter over here
Yeah.
and have him put something in the
I didn't
paper.
know who you were. I've seen you here, the first one and the second one. I didn't know your report. Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
that would be
With the Ohio
great.
Valley News?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
I-
we need somebody
yeah,
from the
sorry.
Star.
This is Austin, I'm sorry.
Hi, Austin.
This is Austin Weaver. He's the one that runs the beat for the paper that includes this group. Well, you got water people.
Well,
doing-
so maybe
Yeah,
a
you got-
little headline that says, the 7-Eleven committee is going to consider the following uses, and we'd like some presentations if there are any other, stakeholders who have suggestions or something to that effect. I'm sure you could word it a lot better than that, but,
Oh, that's a good idea.
and then we can really hear from the public, kinda like we did at the council meeting, right?
So Trevor, to clarify though, are you saying that would take place prior to you guys having a public hearing where you then engage the public on your tentative stances? You'd want the public to be engaged to help inform your initial position and then
Right.
re-engage the public and then finalize your position?
No, what I was thinking is, if we come up with a list, let's say hypothetically, we come up with a list after next meeting, and then it gets out
Are you saying at next meeting or after the meeting?
at the meeting.
following one?
Because
Okay.
you
At
asked
the
us, are we gonna be
meeting. Okay,
prepared
at
to
the
That's what I'm
meeting.
asking, yeah.
Right,
Good.
so let's say we come up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3,
Right.
or whatever. We haven't really invited the public to weigh in and consider adding 4 and 5. And so I don't think we're in a position to say, well, I'm in support of 1, 2, 3, without really having a full-blown,
Like you're saying
Well, that's the whole,
Public
you just
meeting.
did a great summary of what steps 3, 4, and 5 are. The process is, you guys at some point take a position, and then you have the public come in and say, wait, you guys left off options 4 and 5,
Okay.
or what are you doing thinking about option 1? That should be off your list. And then you guys come back, it can be at the end of that meeting or at a subsequent meeting where you guys say, hey, remember how everyone told us how bad idea number 1 was, let's strike that from our list, let's add 4 and 5, oh, I liked it when he said this. And then you guys finalize your list. So it's really tough to get community engagement until you actually begin
Have
to
a
look like
position.
you're taking action.
Got
So
it.
that's one of the reasons why they do it this way, is they say, put something out there for people to be able to engage with and respond to, as opposed to just say, hey, we want more people to engage, because this meeting was publicly promoted and you see the level of engagement.
then I think, based on what you said, we should really kind of push the committee to start taking stances on after or at the next meeting.
Next meeting,
I would
get
like to
everything
see
on the
that.
agenda that we can possibly
Right.
discuss and
And
vote
then-
on.
right.
So we don't have to have serial 4, 5, and 6 more meetings. Let's
Okay.
just get everything there, then we can figure it out.
I
Then we
agree.
can go to the public, is that fair?
I agree.
And then they can push back and throw rocks at us, and then we can figure out, you know, the process of what
So-
we
I would
do.
agree
You're
with
a
that.
doer, I like you.
Do we need to agendize
you in the world.
those?
Nobody does anything.
Specific
Let's get it.
No,
items-
I mean, we will work on the agenda, I'll give you support for it over the
Okay.
coming, week. And so we'll make sure that we work with, again, we heard that we're gonna have someone from either Thea or Mary Ann come to speak about, charter schools. We're gonna have hopefully someone who can speak to the Oakview Center,
Rock Tree, not Rock Tree Sky, Condor Kids, that's Thea, right? Cause I know
Right.
she should include that, cause she's
Sure,
passionate
she
about it.
could.
Was there any other larger presentation items, actually, as I'm thinking about it, might just be those two, maybe you restrict them to somewhere around 15 and 20 minutes, and then that leaves you, even after you engage with them, because it will surely go longer than whatever time you allotted, that then gives you almost an hour to an hour and a half of time to talk about, you know, where you guys are at.
You said Thea could talk about Condor Kids and then Marianne about the charter school, or
Or
are they
Thea
one
can,
in this?
yeah, or someone that's involved with the charter school
Okay.
can talk about it. But what about if someone else in the community has some idea? That
Well,
if
that's
we-
what they're saying.
That's a public hearing, that's
Well,
a great
that-
time for the public hearing for them to come forward with those ideas.
What
So
about
we won't
Chief
be
Peak
making it
4-H and
formal,
CSAR Mutual Water? You listed them as also using the facilities. To what
They
extent do
use it
they
like
use
once a
them?
month.
Oh, so we don't,
The water uses it
Yeah,
like once a
it's-
quarter.
Incidental in a small area.
It's like
so
a
they'll-
search and rescue.
As long as there's a
Like they
building
do.
there, they'll probably
Yeah.
access.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because that can be written in the restricted lease.
That's right.
Yes.
I don't like
Okay,
that compelling
guys, that's
interest.
great. So
Okay,
it's
meeting
it's
adjourned, huh?
possible that you could have, again, one more meeting, then the public hearing, and even in the public hearing, you could finalize your position, or you might have one subsequent meeting, but you could be looking at just 2 to 3 more meetings from here.
Great.
That's great.
Let's push
You
it.
guys are working
Well,
efficiently.
I would
diligently.
like to see you go ahead and put those things that allow us to vote after the public hearing, instead of a third meeting.
That's what I was
after.
asking Andy, if we have to agendize it. He said he's gonna work with it,
Yeah,
so
we
it's
have to
properly
agendize-
noticed.
We'd have to
We'll-
agendize that.
Fully Brown Act compliant.
And
We'll
then,
give you the grace then, too.
and what happens is, when you get there,
2 more meetings?
and you decide that 2 meetings weren't enough and we really need a third one, you have the ability to postpone. But if you don't put it in there,
Precisely.
you don't have the ability to do it. So put more things than less, and we don't have to do them. We can just postpone them to the next one. We just can't move things.
So
up.
start telling the public via social media and whatever that to show up at this meeting if they care about Summit School. Cause now, during the public comment period, that's their chance to weigh in. And we're gonna take a position at the
But
next meeting.
that's gonna be,
Next.
that wouldn't be
That'd be
on
the
the
20
10th, it'll be on the 24th.
Right, but we need to
But
start
you know what?
telling them.
Showing up on the 10th is not a bad idea.
Right.
They can
Some-
still
Get there.
come.
If they wanna get engaged.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right?
Now's the time to do it. We got 3 people here. 4, sorry Travis, but. Alright, cool. Meeting's adjourned, huh?
All right, thank you.
See you on the 10th.